In this video, I want to talk about Nata. He is arguably one of the most disliked characters in Monster Hunter Wilds, if not one of the most disliked characters in Monster Hunter in general. Though I think the title of Handler is gonna always stay at the top there. But I've already made a video about that, so I want to make a video about this. Monster Hunter Wilds, Nata. I'm gonna go over the majority of arguments that are made against the character that I can find, and I'm going to follow up by analyzing what I think the developers needed the character to be within the game, both narratively and gameplay-wise, things like that, as well as showcasing a couple of positives that I personally find in the character. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Let's talk about the criticisms that are levied against Nata. There are a couple of points. One of them is that he's overall poorly written. This one's kind of hard to focus in on, but a lot of the complaints as to the quality of his writing is speaking to this idea that he is supposed to be a kid, but is written like no kid ever acts. I personally disagree with this. I find lots of kids that are around Nata's age to act temperamental and to not think about their actions and the consequences of them before doing them. Things like that is pretty normal for a kid, I would say. Kind of along those same lines is the complaint that he is whiny and emotional. And I want to give some understanding to this. If we look at Nata as a character, he is a kid. At best, he's maybe a 15-year-old. But overall, he's a kid. So there's that. He's in his teenage years, so he's very temperamental and he's got his hormones moving all over the place, so he's going to have a lot of emotions. As to the whiny part, he is a child that has been ripped from his family by a monster, and he has spent whoever knows how long wandering the desert by himself and all these other biomes by himself in order to try and find help. He doesn't even know how long it's been. He then gets taken away from the land in general to go to the Hunters Guild, however long that takes, and then he's back in the Forbidden Lands, desperately trying to find his family and make sure that they're still alive after Arkfeld killed, or potentially killed them. We later find out that they're not dead, but the whole time I was playing the game, I was thinking, no, this family's dead. When we get there, all of his people are dead. That's what this is going towards. So, of course, he's going to have a lot of emotions as he goes throughout this story. He's got a lot of trauma tied to Arkfeld himself, as well as a lot of just worry and feelings about trying to get back to his family. Like, that's his sole focus. Not only to get back there, but to make sure that they're safe. Okay, so another point is that he needlessly puts himself in danger. And this is something that we're going to go into a little bit more when we talk about what the developers needed Nata to be. But I'm going to say that I disagree that he needlessly puts himself in danger, especially in comparison to someone like the Handler. We very rarely see the hunter saving Nata. Most of the time, when Nata is involved in a cutscene in which the hunter is facing a monster, he is on the back of somebody else's sacred, and then everybody else runs away. So saying Nata himself is the one that's putting himself in danger is a little bit extreme. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about why I think people feel this and what the developers were doing to kind of create this feeling. And lastly, and I think this is the most common criticism that's put against Nata, is that he compares himself to Arkfeld, specifically the Guardian Arkfeld, while that monster is eviscerating other monsters. And I agree to an extent. It is a little cognitively dissonant to have this person being like, no, he's just like me, while this monster is just going to town, just eviscerating all of this flesh just because it can. Like, it can't actually eat. It has a closed esophagus, but it's still trying to eat. And maybe if there was another scene that we could have had, all I'm trying to say is that I think this one is the one that carries the most weight. Because, yeah, Nata is talking about how he's finally had this character arc where Arkfeld is no longer just this mindless killing machine to him. He is a representation of kind of the forced trauma, the generational trauma of his people, and this, like, forced role that he has to be. Like, Nata is starting to feel that himself, and our entire time knowing Nata has been in comparison to Arkfeld. So it makes sense to an extent that the writers would want to do something like this. That he continues to compare himself to Arkfeld even as he grows and finds himself now back home, but more trapped than ever. He spent all this time being free and exploring the same way that Arkfeld was to an extent. While Arkfeld was killing, Nata was exploring, trying to find life. It's this interesting, like, dichotomy, and that it's tough because you're trying to ask a kid to be like, we're yin and yang, without saying we're yin and yang, but also recognizing that it's a kid, so he can't necessarily be the most articulated with his emotions. And it's, yeah. All of that is to say, I think the point is valid, and I also understand what the developers are trying to do in this moment. It almost makes me wonder if there was another scene that they had where Nata makes this discovery and Arkfeld is not doing this. Like, I feel like if Arkfeld was, like, sleeping or, like, cleaning himself or something that most other animals do before, like, visibly being overcome by, like, an urge to kill, and Nata can have this, like, revolutionary moment while looking at Arkfeld being peaceful, I think that could have done a lot, rather than looking at Arkfeld in the moment when he's being extremely violent and everybody else is like, we gotta kill this thing. And Nata's like, well, hold on, this guy's just like me. If we saw more times of this guy being peaceful, I think that would have helped a lot. Now I want to talk about what the developers needed Nata to be, or at least what I think the developers needed Nata to be. What I am able to gather from the little bits and pieces and the understanding of the gameplay and the story and all that. So, first and foremost, Monster Hunter is a power fantasy game. Specifically, I would say, especially in these more recent titles, this is a hero's power fantasy, where you are to be this heroic person, and they have been leaning more and more into this as they've been getting voice acting and characters. You are the special, you're the hero, you are the only person who can do this job. Like it or hate it, that's just kind of where we're at in Monster Hunter as a whole. And so in order to show this off, you need people to be put in danger, so that you, the hunter, can save them. To be like, look how awesome I am. Look how powerful I am. Look how heroic I am. And Wilds does something different than World, in which we visibly see a lot more types of characters being put in danger. I think the Doshagama invading Kunafa village is one of the best examples of that. And that happens pretty early on in the gameplay. But of course, a lot of what the hunter is doing is exploring the lands, and that necessitates being outside of villages sometimes. So most of the time that you're going to be encountering the monsters, you don't have the villagers who are very clearly unable to defend themselves. What you have at most is yourself, Alma, Gemma, and Nata. Those are kind of the four characters that can be in the way of a monster, and one of them is you. So you have to be the one that's saving the day every single time. This is mostly in talking about Nata constantly needing to be saved. Because again, I don't think he does, but this feeling that you are the hero and you are saving people, you have to save people from something, and you're saving people from the monster, and vice versa. You have to be saving people, and so Nata, being the most defenseless one, gets seen as being saved. Now, there is a specific moment that I think really highlighted this for a lot of people when it came to this criticism that he needs to be saved a lot, and that's specifically the moment when he goes to try and attack Arkfeld with a rock because nobody else is doing it. And I don't know, that's a single incident, and it was a big moment for him, and he didn't get in danger. He didn't put the entire group in danger. Arkfeld left without attacking them. It was only when lightning struck and revived Raydao, which, by the way, really cool moment, that all of a sudden Raydao is now looking at them. Nata had nothing to do with that. He didn't summon the lightning. He didn't revive Raydao. He didn't say, hey, look over here. He tried to have a moment and then was pulled aside and being like, hey, you can't do that. A rock isn't enough to kill these guys. And this is clearly a duo of very dangerous monsters. So let the people who are trained to do this. It almost parallels in a lot of ways like new Monster Hunter players when they go to try and fight something like Arkfeld when they haven't even killed a Quemitress yet. Like, no, you're gonna get your butt kicked, so let's stop that from happening. And again, the moments that Nata needs saved doesn't put anybody else in danger. It's not like... Yeah, I already said that. The next part that we're going to talk about is honestly where I think the source of all of this annoyance and anger at Nata comes from. And that's the fact that, in a way, Nata himself is the main character. You might be the protagonist, you might be the self-insert, but Nata is the one who the story revolves around. That's kind of what that needs to be, because as the hero, as the self-insert, your hunter needs to be a pretty blank slate for emotions and things like that. It's a different kind of role-playing than someone like Shepard from Mass Effect, where you have this like array of personality and your choices in role-playing are affecting the personality and that personality is affecting the world. That's not the kind of role-playing that Monster Hunter is. Again, it's the hero fantasy, right? It's not about how your choices make a big impact in the world of the video game. It's more, you are playing the role of this character on this linear story, which is, by the way, how most video games are. I'm going to make a separate video about that kind of stuff later. But for the purposes of this specific video, because of that, your character can't have an arc. Your character can't really have a big, huge impact on the narrative of the people around them, because the more impact your character has, the more personality they have, the less space for the player to imprint their personality onto their character. And so what you then need, you still need a character who's going to have an arc. You still need a character who's going to make decisions that affect the people around them in order for there to be some sort of emotional impact. And that role is going to get filled by Nata because he's the main character. It's him. He's the first person we see, really. He's the first person that gets talked to. He's the first thing in a cutscene, besides the other villagers, of the Sild, or whatever the village is called. Nata also serves the interesting narrative function of being a character to exposit to. You already have the newcomers of the guild that need to understand the lands of the Forbidden Lands. So you have the villagers that get to kind of go, oh, this is what this place is about. This is our culture. These are kind of the monsters that inhabit this area, which shares that burden versus like something like Monster Hunter World, where it was mostly yourself and the handler who didn't know what was going on and everybody had to explain to them. So it kind of like focused this level of ignorance onto really one specific character who could respond, which was the handler. In Wilds, that duty is spread out. It's a little bit more thoughtful this time around. So you have the guild in a new place, so they have to be exposited to. But you also have a child who is completely unaware of the guild at large and hunting monsters and what that means and the world around them as well. So you get this nice balance of when the land needs to be explained to people, it can happen to the entire group, not just Nata. But when something that's more Hunter Guild specific needs to be explained, like, oh, why do we have 8 people in this specific hunt? Or why are you using that weapon? That's so interesting. You get to have people that are from the guild go, oh, this is why we use these weapons. This is why we use shock traps. This is why we use these things. It is a really, really nice balance, and I think that's something that's not often talked about when discussing Nata in particular, or discussing Monster Hunter World and Wilds as a combo duo kind of thing, because they are distinctly sequels. So yeah, that's just a really nice, neat little feature, and I think segues nicely into talking about other things that I think are pretty nice about Nata, because he gets all this hate, and I think he deserves a little bit more love. So let's talk about that. I love the very cool lore dynamics of being this kid who is in a village that's isolated from the world around them and then gets isolated from that isolated village, so he gets to see the world around him and learn more about what it means to exist in a space that doesn't constantly judge you for the crimes of people that are generations long dead. And that he doesn't have to shoulder that for most of the game. And it's a really cool moment when he comes back to his home and realizes that now he does have to shoulder this. This is not just his responsibility of being part of this village, but now this is his responsibility being effectively the leader of this village. And then he suddenly gets the added burden of being the potential savior of the entirety of the Forbidden Lands, which is so much to put on a kid, and he grapples with that so interestingly, where he gets very introspective and he has to mature at a very, very quick rate, right? He goes from thinking that he and Arkfeld are the same in a lot of ways, which in a lot of ways they are. They are very trapped creatures who are forced to do things based off of the decisions of people that are long dead for generations. And then he's forced to mature into that. And then you get Zoshia, and he has to make the decision with the key around his necklace. He could kill all of his people or save them, and it's not clear which decision is going to do that. And I think that's a really cool moment, and it's very nice to have someone like Nata having to internalize all that while everybody else is discussing those options around him. I also really like that you have this character that doesn't know the guild and gets to learn more about it through the characters around him's actions, specifically the player character. And Gemma and Alma get to talk about the world around and get to inform him about the guild, and he gets to become interested in this to where when high rank comes around, this boy becomes a fledgling hunter. Like, that's just such a nice arc. And yeah, personally, I wish that we could have seen a couple of more moments throughout the story of him trying a couple of these hunter things. Like, if we just like gave him a moment where he could help kill this game's versions of Aptonoth or something, very similar to like God of War when Atreus has to kill the elk or something like that. It would take away from the hero's fantasy and it would take away from our characters for a little bit, but I think that would be a nice bit of character growth that we would get to see. Perhaps we see this in the expansion. I don't know. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on Nata in Monster Hunter Wilds. So let me know what you think. Do you agree with any of the things that I said? Do you disagree with them? I want to know your thoughts. I had a lot of fun analyzing both him and the handler from Monster Hunter World in the last video. And I think I might try to make a series out of this. However infrequent or frequent I make that, I'm not sure yet. I might be getting a little bit more busy, so that might be slower, but who knows? I'm enjoying kind of looking at these underappreciated or disliked characters and trying to get a better understanding of why they are the way that they are. So if you like this too, consider liking the video, comment your own thoughts, let me know what you think. And specifically, if you have other characters or moments or games in particular that you think are underappreciated and deserve a second look, or are very, very disliked and you're not 100% sure why, go ahead and drop a comment and let me know, because that's going to give me ideas for other things that I can talk about. So, until next time, bye-bye now.